I'm Roxanne Carter, and this is block 12 of our 2019 Technique Sampler. This is our last block. It's one of the funnest ones, I think, to do. It gives you a really totally different look to the block. So this is the block as it is right now. I have not quilted this one, but we have the block right down here in the corner. So this is my quilted block, and it is just, it's easy piecing with some folded corners, but the sculptured border is what we're trying to learn to do. Okay, so this is our pattern for the block 12 block. And so the very first thing we're going to do is you're going to take your accent 2 3/4 inch squares, and we're going to make half squares out of them. I have accent 3 here, and so you just put your background square right side together to your accent 3 2.5 inch square, draw a line 1/4 inch on both sides. Voila, we have it all done here. Press the seam to the accent, and then we're going to take our little square here, and we're going to place the square here so that the diagonal line of the square is on the seam, and the 2 1/4 right there and right there is on the edges of the block. If you can't get it lined up perfectly, we can always trim 2 sides first, then trim it around and trim the other 2 sides. So now I will just kind of turn this around and put my diagonal line there with 2 1/4 and 2 1/4. Make sure that it's nice and straight, and we can just kind of trim out. When we press it, sometimes they get stretched out, so sometimes you have to trim both sides. So there is our little 2 1/4 inch. Everything on this one is based kind of 2 1/4. So we then take that square, and we're going to place it like here, sew it to a 2 1/4 background square, just as our picture shows. And then our next step is to take our 2 1/4 inch background squares, and we're placing it on the accent 5 2 1/4 by 4 pieces here. We notice that they're going in opposite directions. So we're going to sew, and then we're going to press these back, trim to 1/4 inch when we're done. And so we have these going in opposite directions. That's very important to have our leaves on the side of our block go the right way. So once we get that done, we're going to then take our 2 1/4 square background square and place it on the 2 1/4 by 4 accent 3 piece. Draw the line, and notice that the line is the angle of the line. So then we're going to sew on the line and flip it back and trim away to 1/4 inch. Once we have all those units done, then we're going to take our little pieces that we made here, put those two together, sew that seam, and then we're going to take our accent here, place it to the bottom, sew that seam, oops, and then this one here goes with our accent 4 2 1/4 inch square, and sew those on. So we make our whole unit just like the flower it shows here in the block. So here's where we sew it all together, and here's where we put the block together. So these pieces are 1 1/2 by 5 3/4, sewn down to 1 inch. And then we put the opposite colors, your same color, so it's accent 1, accent 3, accent 1, accent 3. So, and your little center square is part of your main print. It's just a 1 1/2 inch square. So that's how we make our center. Okay, so we're going to take our 8 7/8 inch background triangles. We cut them once diagonally, and they are going to go onto the sides of our center square here. And we just fold them in half and crease it, and then that crease is going to go right onto there like that. And so it just centers right into your block, hang over on each end a little. And so then we're going to sew that one on, and then we're going to put the other one on here. So all 4 will go on eventually. lined up. And it should hang over the outside edge about 3/8 of an inch. Right where you go through the junction at 1/4. And then we will press it back, and then we'll add our last square, our last triangle. Okay, on the last page of our pattern is our template for our sculptured border. So I traced it onto my template plastic and cut it out on the outside line, and now I'm ready. Then I traced it onto fusible web. And I use this soft fuse, but you can use any fusible web you choose to use, Steam-A-Seam or Heat and Bond, whichever. And I then cut it out just a little bit larger from the fusible and ironed it down to my fabric squares. And these squares are 3 by 8.5. So they're 3 by 8.5, and they just fit right on there. You just don't want to make sure that you don't have any of the fusible hanging off the edges to get onto your ironing board. If you do that, you want to use a silicone sheet on your ironing board when you're ironing them down. So once I get that done, then I can cut these out on the line, and then we have our pieces right here. So these are already prepared for us. And so then we take and peel off our fusible on the back side. And then these are going to go onto our pattern here. So these line up at the outside edge. Move these out of the way. These line up at the outside edge like this, even to the outside edge. And then the next one is going to overlap it right here, overlap at the corners, and then it will kind of overlap onto the seam there. So then we will iron these down. And ironing them down, 1, 2, 3. And then this one will overlap that one at that corner there. And then this one will line up there. And they don't quite match, but the bias that we're going to put on top will cover that. Okay, so talking about bias, we're going to make our own bias tape, our own bias bars. It is a bias bar. This one is the 1/4 inch bias bar that I chose to use, and it's going to just cover our bias, our raw edges. So it's just going to cover these raw edges right along there. I top stitch them down. As you can see, I just top stitch them down on both sides, so it makes a nice pretty look. You can also hand applique if you want. Okay, so I did make one mistake in this pattern. The piece that I had you cut, the accent 5, I had you cut one strip that is 9 by 12. It should have been 9 by 21. I kind of transposed the numbers. You just can't get all of the strips out of the 12-inch piece, so you may have to get another hunk of fabric. I'm sorry about that. What we do is we place the 45-degree angle of our ruler on the bottom of our strip here. This is the 9-inch strip here, and this is by 21. So we're going to take and we're going to cut a 45-degree angle first, and then we're going to take and we're going to, you can use that also, but we can take and now we're going to cut a 1-inch strip right across there. So 1 inch here. Oops, get that press out. And you're going to cut this whole strip into 1-inch segments. Okay, so I've already done some, so I'm going to set that aside for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use our bias bar, and we're going to cut these, or we're going to place the ruler next to the machine, put the needle down in the machine, put the bar next to it, and then cut a little bit away because we need some space. This bar is thick. And so you can either use foam tape, or if you don't have foam tape with you on hand, you can just put a stack of 4 or 5 sticky notes and place it right next to the bar. We just need a guide. So then we'll take the bar away. We never sew with the bar inside. Now we're going to take our strip, our 1-inch strip, we're going to fold it in half. Don't press it with the iron because we can't get that crease out. But we're going to then take and we're going to sew right on that. So the fold of the strip is right next to that fold there. It's like 1/8 of an inch seam, but it's hard to manage. You just keep the raw edges together there and the fold next to the stack of notes. Before I go too far, I always like to take my bar and put it inside and make sure that it will fit, and this does. So my measurement was good, and now I will finish sewing this strip. Now the bar goes inside the strip and you roll the seam to the back, and now we're going to go over and press that with the iron. So just roll the seam right along the bar. There are metal bars also. They get hot, so be careful with those, but this is just a 1/4 inch bias bar. Then we press again from the front side. And then as it pushes through, I press again to make that nice and crisp and flat. And then we can finish pressing the rest of our strip here. Get on there. Like that. And pull the bar out and then flatten it all nice and straight. Okay, you need some sort of a glue. This is Roxanne's glue, and this has a really fine little tip on it. I can get it off. And so what we do is we take this, and you can use a regular glue stick as well, but this is a little easier, I think, to use. And we're just going to put little dots of glue right along the outside edge, and I only do like one little side at a time. When we put this on, we want to be able to have the bias be able to curve as much as possible. So I always try to put my seam going toward the curve. So we're going to curve it this way. So we're going to start with this right out here in the outside edge here, and we're going to then curve this one around here, and our biggest curve is here, so we're going to go up to that point there. So that's held down. Now I'm going to take and put just a little tiny dot of glue right there, and then we're going to glue to the next point. And we fold this back on itself like a little miter, and then we're going to fold this over, and then that's going to go up to there like that. So we have our little miter there, and we're going to fold up to here. We're going to do the same thing at this point. We're going to put a little tiny dot of glue right there and glue to our next point. Fold it back on top of itself. Put your whole finger, hold your finger down, nail down to hold it down, and spin it so that it goes right around like a nice little miter, and then go around again. Then we're going to do another one last one here, and so we're going to go here, and we're just going to stop right there. So this one is going to fold back on top of itself here, and then we're going to go and do this little curve right here. Okay, so that's right there. Then we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut this off about 1/8 of an inch beyond that edge of our strip, of our piece here. So about 1/8 of an inch further from that, and that'll hold that down. Now we're going to cover that one with our next strip. So I'm just going to trim my edges off here, and oh, I want the other end. I want the seam to go that way, so I'm going to trim this end. And so we're going to put our dot of glue right here, up to there, and this is going to curve right there on top of that piece and go right out to there. And then we'll fold back and we'll continue all the way around over to here. And so that is how we do our edge. Then I top stitch with a matching thread right along both sides, or you can hand applique both sides down, but it looks really well, works really well. If you have a shorter piece, you can always take this piece, like if I could only go to there, then I had a shorter piece, I would take that piece, trim it even, put it underneath this piece, and then fold it over and continue on. So it works that way too. Just doesn't give you the mitered look of this one. Okay, so as you can see on the finished block, I have done that. Here's my corner right here that I have here. So there, I've just finished them all the way around. This is where I tucked one underneath the other one at a point, and I usually try to start a second piece at that point there. So you can just fold it over. So if I went up to this point here, my next little piece would just start here and flip over like that. So it's very easy to do using two different pieces if you don't have a long enough piece, but it goes all the way around and stops. And then you can do that all the way through until you get them all done, and then you can go ahead and applique them down. So it really is a fun look, gives you a really beautiful look to our block, and it's a fun finish for our sampler. So that kind of concludes our sampler blocks. I hope you had fun with it. This is how we put it together. There are directions in the videos on how to put our rows together, our blocks together, if you're doing the Quilt As You Go. If you're not using the Quilt As You Go, you would just use the 1 3/4 inch strips as your sashing, and that would put them together in just a regular sashing row. I hope you had fun with this sampler, and thank you all for joining me on this fun trip.